Hi folks, it's Mark here. It's Sunday evening, the 6th of January, and this is the promised video just telling you or giving you a count of what happened on my cycling accident and what's happened since. So, on the morning of September the 8th, I went for an early morning bike ride in the local area where I live. I rode through Thatcham. I ride through a small village called Acident, and about an hour and 20 minutes into my bike ride, my front tyre hit a pothole or a divot in the road, which caused my bike to veer off the road to the left. I was doing about 26 miles an hour, so I was going at a pretty decent speed. Luckily for me, as I came off my bike, I actually landed on a grass verge, and it was quite soft, quite springy. Unfortunately, well, I braced myself as I came off. My left hand hit the ground first, and I found a very sharp pain in the upper left side of my body. I put my right hand up to my collarbone and felt a very, very big lump. So I knew instantly that I'd broken my collarbone. I've watched enough cycling over the years on television to know that, it's the most common injury probably of a cycling accident is a broken collarbone. Anyway, second part of luck was the gentleman that was driving his car directly behind me pulled over to help me out. At this point I was sitting up. I hadn't hit my head, I hadn't hurt anything else, so I was conscious and there were no problems with that. Anyway, the gentleman got out of his vehicle, and luckily for me, it turned out that he was an off-duty paramedic. He had a look under my shirt at my collarbone and said, "Oh yes, that's your collarbone gone." So he went into the boot of his car where he had a medical kit, and he pulled out a sling, of all things. Put my arm in a sling, he phoned an ambulance, and then, third piece of luck, a lady who had heard the accident as she was standing in her driveway came running out to see if I was okay, and she very kindly offered to take my bike into her house. She gave me a phone number and said, when you're out of hospital, give me a call and you can come and pick up your bike. Anyway, I waited by the roadside for about 20 minutes. Oh, and I should say that the lady who offered to take in my bike, she also bought me out a blanket because it was pretty cold, and she said that I was completely white and looking very, very shaky, which I don't really remember, but she said it, so it must be true. Anyway, I waited 20 minutes, half an hour. The ambulance came, took me to Basingstoke Hospital. I had an x-ray very, very quickly. Doctor called me in, said, "Yes, here's the x-ray. You've broken your collarbone. Broken collarbones tend to heal naturally," she told me. She gave me a sling, some cocodamol, some very powerful painkillers, and basically said, go home, have your arm in a sling for the next 4 to 6 weeks. When you take your arm out of the sling, you might need some physiotherapy, so here's a number for physio. So at this point, I'm going to put an image of my x-ray on the screen. It's an x-ray, so there's no blood, there's no, broken skin, there's nothing too gruesome, but it's not a very pleasant image because you can see it's a very clear break, and the broken collarbone also was sticking upwards just beneath the surface of my skin. That's why I had such a huge lump. So I'm going to put that x-ray image on the screen. If you don't want to see it, then obviously I suggest you look away. I'll leave the x-ray on the screen for a short period of time, and then I will tell you when I've removed it so that you can look back. So here's the x-ray. Yeah, not very nice. Anyway, so I went home. I spent 6 weeks with my arm in a sling. Finally got my arm out of the sling, and my arm was basically a complete dead weight for a couple of weeks. And then I went on holiday for a week to Weymouth, and everything was going really well until one morning I woke up in Weymouth, and my left arm and my left shoulder were completely, it was as if somebody had cased them in cement. I couldn't move my left arm, couldn't move my left shoulder, and the pain was, well, it's something I can't really explain. The pain was absolutely horrific, and I recognised that that wasn't anything to do with my collarbone. The pain was kind of like, if you can imagine somebody attaching a metal vice all the way along your arm and then squeezing that vice really hard. That's what the pain was like. It was extraordinarily painful. So, I only had 2 days left of my holiday in Weymouth. So when I got home, I immediately phoned the hospital to make an appointment for physiotherapy. Because at the time I didn't know what the problem was. They were fantastic. I had an appointment the very next day. I went to see a very professional, very concerned lady called Kirsty at Basingstoke Physiotherapy. And she very, very quickly diagnosed me with a frozen shoulder. So I was told that a frozen shoulder can take 6 to 12 months to heal. She started to do some physio. She gave me a sheet of exercises. So I went home, started to do the exercises, and the frozen shoulder, luckily again, improved pretty quickly. It was a good improvement. So I went to see Kirsty every fortnight for about 2 months, and then she decided, because of my work, because I'm self-employed, she wanted to speed up the recovery process of my frozen shoulder. So she referred me to see a consultant at the fracture clinic, who would give me an injection of cortisone to speed up the healing of the shoulder. So on December the 17th, I went to the fracture clinic, saw a consultant called Mr. Avis, very friendly, very nice guy. He walked into the consultancy room where I was sitting, and he immediately said to me, "Oh dear, I don't think your collarbone has healed." He got me to do a few basic exercises whilst he pushed on my collarbone, and he said, "No, I don't think that's healed." Now, the thing is, I've read a lot about broken collarbones and how it leaves you with a lump underneath the skin quite often. However, I don't have a lump where the collarbone was. I have a very, very large, prominent ridge of bone sticking up right beneath the surface of the skin. And if I put my fingers on top of that bone, it's almost, if you imagine what the top of a cliff looks like, it's like that. It's like a peak of bone. So the consultant said, "Did you not get an appointment to come and see me after you had broken it?" And I said, "No. A&E basically just sent me home." And he said they shouldn't have done that. What A&E should have done is, as soon as I left A&E on the day I broke the collarbone, they should have made me an appointment for the fracture clinic for a couple of weeks later. They shouldn't have just sent me home with some pills and a sling, because he said that needed to be operated on. So instead of getting an operation for a broken collarbone, I ended up going home for 6 weeks, and obviously the collarbone isn't properly healed. It's called a non-union. Some of it apparently has healed. Mr. Avis, the consultant, sent me for an x-ray that day on the 17th. I had the x-ray and he said it looks like the bone has joined, but it's a very small part, and the x-ray was basically inconclusive. By the way, I've now removed the image of the x-ray from the screen. So Mr. Avis said, I'm going to send you for an MRI because I need to see properly what's going on inside of you. And then he didn't give me the injection of cortisone. So, stay tuned, folks. It actually gets better. Well, not better. So I went home expecting to hear from the fracture clinic for an MRI scan. Now, when I left the fracture clinic, I had to make an appointment for the results of the MRI scan. I don't know why you have to make an appointment for a date for the results before you actually know what date the scan is going to be, but that's the way they work. So I made an appointment at the fracture clinic to get the results, went home, carried on with my stretches. A couple of weeks after that, I went back to see Kirsty at physio. She was delighted with the progress of my frozen shoulder. I can get my arm above my head. I've got a lot of motion, so she decided to discharge me from physio because there's not much else she could do. It was just a case of me focusing at home and fixing the problem. 1 week after that, I then received an extraordinary letter from the fracture clinic telling me that they were putting my appointment for the results of the MRI scan back by an entire month. It was February, start of February, and they'd cancelled that appointment and put it back an entire month to the middle of March. At this point, I became very angry. I've already spent 4 months not having the problem fixed when it should have been fixed the day I broke the damn thing, because I should have been referred to have an operation and not just sent home. So I phoned a lady at the fracture clinic. I explained the story. So she said, I'll try and get you an appointment for the results much sooner. At which point I said, well, I haven't actually had a date for the MRI scan. She looked on her computer system and said, well, we definitely sent a request to the MRI department. So here's the number to the MRI department. Give them a call and see if you can find out when your test is. So I called the MRI department, and guess what? The MRI department said that the fracture clinic hadn't sent them a request for an MRI scan. There was no record of me needing an MRI scan. So I've just spent 3 weeks at home waiting for an MRI scan date, and nobody at the hospital had actually asked MRI department for a scan for me. So I got back to the fracture clinic lady and explained the situation. At which point she said, right, I will write to the consultant's secretary and ask her to sort this out in person. I then said, well, I'm sorry, but this is really terrible. You know, I was badly treated in the first place. I should have had an operation to fix the collarbone. Instead, I was just sent home with a sling and pills. So I said, what I'd like you to do is I would like somebody to contact me and tell me the dates that I have for an MRI scan and the date that I have where I can come back for my results, because I'm not sure that I don't want to spend another 3 weeks sitting at home waiting for a letter for a scan and thinking, I wonder if they've bothered to do it this time. So the situation at the moment, anyway, sorry, that was Friday. I haven't heard anything back. So I'm going to leave it until the close of business on the 7th of January, which is tomorrow. If I haven't heard back from the hospital by then, I'm going to, well, reluctantly, because I don't want to do this, but I will have to file a formal complaint against the hospital because I believe, I don't know if it's the case, but I believe that this is a case of medical negligence. When you break a bone and you go to accident and emergency, you are supposed to be referred to the fracture clinic. The fracture clinic is the place where they are experts on broken bones. The doctor in the ARE is just a generic doctor. They know a little bit about everything, but not a lot about everything, if you know what I mean. That's the procedure. You break a bone, you get sent to the fracture clinic, they then take a look at you and decide if there's further action. In my case, my broken collarbone is sufficiently bad with that huge ridge of bone sticking up that I needed to have an operation. There was no way that my collarbone would fix itself in the position that it's in. Now that, in my opinion, is medical negligence. Somebody with a broken bone being told to just go home and take pills when it should have been obvious from the x-ray and the condition of my skin where there's bone pushing through. It's not pushed right through the skin, by the way, it's just underneath the surface. Should have been obvious that I needed, but even if it wasn't obvious to the A&E doctor, the procedure is you get sent to the fracture clinic. And I didn't. So I spent 4 months. It's now 4 months since I had my accident. I'm self-employed. I haven't worked a single day since my accident. So that's 4 months without any money. I should have been sent to the fracture clinic and I was sent home with nothing. That's medical negligence in my opinion. Now I'm prepared if the fracture clinic contacts me by the close of business tomorrow, the 7th of January, with those 2 dates that I want, the appointment for the scan and the appointment for the results. I'm prepared to let it go because I value the National Health Service. I think it's wonderful and I don't want to complain about them. I don't want to file a proper complaint. But I will if this isn't sorted because it's been 4 months and then I had to wait another 3 weeks for a date for an MRI scan, which in actual fact nobody had actually bothered to request for me. So at the moment, as I sit here, nothing is being done to help me fix my broken collarbone, which is very worrying because I'm constantly worried that if it's not healed properly, is it going to push through the skin? Am I going to be in pain, you know? So at the moment, nothing's being done. Now the problem is, as I said, it's already been 4 months since the accident. If they get me an MRI scan, it's probably going to be in about a month from now. After the MRI scan, you have to wait 3 weeks to have another appointment for the results. So that's 1 month possibly for the scan, 3 weeks for the results. And if the results say that I have to have an operation, Mr. Avis, the consultant, seems to think that I will have to have an operation. The operation will entail them breaking the piece of bone that's healed, putting the 2 ends of the bone together and then securing them with a metal plate and screws. Which, you know, it's not very pleasant knowing that somebody's going to take a hammer and chisel to your bones, but it is what it is, right? It's got to be done. Now, so it's going to be at least a month for the scan, 3 weeks for the next result, and then if Mr. Avis says I have to have an operation, knowing the NHS, it could be 6 months, could be 9 months, it could be longer before I actually get the operation. So something that should have been fixed within a couple of days after my accident, and then all I would had to have done was had 6 weeks in the sling, and then that would have been it. It would have been fixed. So instead of 6 weeks overcoming this problem, by the time I've had my accident, and by the time I've had my operation, by the time I've then left my arm in a sling for another 6 weeks, because I've got to recover again, it could be more than a year. It might be more than 1 year since I broke my collarbone that I finally get it fixed and it's out of the sling and I'm cured. Now, I'm not somebody to complain, and as I said, I don't want to complain about the National Health Service, but my collarbone should have been fixed very quickly. A&E should have sent me to the fracture clinic. The fracture clinic would have seen that it wouldn't heal naturally, and they would have then operated. And they would have had to have operated quite swiftly because it was a very, very nasty break. Instead of maybe 2 or 3 months until I was healed, it's going to be possibly more than 1 year. And I don't think that's acceptable. So, that's the situation, folks. It's not a nice tale. I'm actually, psychologically speaking, I'm kind of okay with it. I'm just getting on with what I'm getting on with, you know. It is what it is. I've been reading a lot of Stoic philosophy whilst I've been ill, and that's helped. Not sure I would have got through the last 4 months without it, to be honest. But this situation now is completely unacceptable. I should have had an operation after leaving A&E. Instead, all that I got was a sling and a packet of tablets.